I built this for a past client, and it took me a while to figure out, but after using Grid and starting to understand it more, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so easy. It makes sense. So what I'm going to do in this tutorial video is one, I'm going to show you the final product and show you how it works. Two, we're going to break it down. And three, I'm going to show you how to rebuild this thing from scratch. So you'll know how to do it and even copy it into an existing project, and you'll know how to use it. Yeah, so let's do this. All right, so here's the product comparison chart. Let's break it down. So the first thing I have is the comparison wrapper. Basically, this is just a div that holds everything inside of it. This way you can just copy this overall wrapper and paste it into another project and it'll work, okay? But inside of there, we have the title, and then inside of there, we have our pricing grid. And how I set up this grid is simply I have 4 columns and 3 rows, okay? And for the first column, I set that as 2 fractions or 2FR, and that's it. Okay, and the rest stays at 1. Now inside of the first row, I have a top chart row. This is the heading. Okay, so this holds the labels of feature, and then if you have a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, holds these labels as well. And I just put a bottom border for that. Okay. And also, if you notice, if I scroll down, to make sure that the user knows which check mark is for which tier, okay, I made it sticky. And how to do that is simply using position sticky right here and setting it to 0 at the top. Okay, awesome. And now for the each feature, I put that inside of a div as well. Okay, so we have the top chart and then the features row wrapper. And yeah, so that spans from row 2 to 3. Okay, and inside of that we have price rows. Okay, and all of this is just copy and pasting the same price row over and over and over again. Okay, and how this grid is set up is the same thing, 2FR 1 1 1, just copying the outer grid. Okay, and this has 4 columns and 2 rows, and the second row has the actual the feature detailed description. Okay, then you have check boxes, and this is the down arrow, which is in a link block, and that's what creates the element trigger for showing and hiding the actual details. Okay, so let's go ahead and rebuild this from scratch. Okay, you're gonna go here, and we're gonna start on a work page. We're gonna call it work, and now it's fresh. Let's do this. So first thing, we're gonna have that overall wrapper. Okay, so we're just gonna call it wrapper, and that's it. I'm not gonna really touch it. Okay, and now I'm going to go ahead and put a heading. Let's just call this chart heading. I'm gonna center this. There we go. Let's say product comparison chart. And for the next element, for the grid, I want to push it away from the actual title. So I'm just going to do something like that. Let's drag in a grid. Make sure that it's inside the wrapper. There we go. And what I did was 4 columns, and I think I can leave it at 2. We'll try 2 for now. If I need 3, I'll do it. But we'll leave the gap as is. Set this to 2FR, dragging this handle. And we're done with that. Now let's do our first row. So for our first row, let's go ahead and let's drag a grid as well. Okay, and we'll do the same thing. 4 columns, and you know what? Let's do 1 row. And the reason why I'm doing 1 row and not using Flexbox is because I want the exact same sizes of the columns. So trying to figure that out using Flexbox with Grid, it may be kind of hard. And so just make it easier for yourself and do grid in grid. There's nothing wrong with that. All right, so now let's span this over to all 4 columns, and let's edit that again. I want to make sure, hold on, there we go, grid 2. I want to edit this grid and make sure that this is 2FR, and there we go. Cool. So we have grid in grid, and let me just call this outer grid, and we'll call this one inner grid. All right, cool. And the only difference between this inner grid and then all the other pricing row grids is it's going to have a bottom bar. And so let's go ahead and say header row. And that way we can give it a bottom bar. We'll do like, say 5 and do the color. Let's do blue. Sweet. Okay. Oh, okay. So it's going the full length. So what we can do with the overall wrapper is go to the padding, hold shift, and we can do something like this. Let's do something like 20. There. Okay, cool. All right. Now let's go ahead and put in our labels. So let's go ahead and put in this first label right here. We're going to call this features. So I have text blocks with features, and let's do this. Yeah, let's hold option and click and drag, and then we're going to name this tier 1. Hold option, click and drag. Call this tier 2. Hold option, click and drag, and tier 3. And now I want to make sure that these are all bold. Now I don't want to have to bold each one. I want to bold them all. So what I can do is click here and click on the inner grid. And since it already has a combo class, I can go ahead and make this bold. Okay. And let's go ahead and fix these. Let's go ahead and make this bigger. Interesting, it's not happening here. What's going on with that? Ah, this needs to be inside. There we go. That needed to be inside. It was outside of the inner grid. Okay. All right, and let's go ahead and one more time with the inner grid. Let's do 200% on the line height. And we can do, say, 300. There we go. Cool. And lastly, for these, watch what happens. This is a cool thing about grid. I'm going to center this, and look, I didn't have to create a new class or anything. It's centered because of grid. I don't know. That's just really cool. Okay. Now that we're done with that, let's go ahead and, yeah, we have this inner grid. Let's, in this little gap right here, to make sure that I'm clicking inside the inner grid, I'm going to hold Alt and click and drag into the next row. And so if you look here, I've just created another inner grid, but this time it's inside, it's on the second row of the outer grid, and you can tell right here. Start at row 2, end at row 2. All right, now I'm going to remove this class. Cool, because I don't need that bottom border, okay? So for here, I'm going to call this the feature. I mean, this is whatever the feature is, you know, of the product, so put whatever. And let's go ahead and instead of a text block, let's drag in some sort of checkbox. Ooh, that's big. Cool. So I'm going to delete all 3 of these. And now I can just say hold Alt and click and drag, hold Alt, click and drag. Oh, I should have, here. Let me undo that because let's go ahead and call this check and set the width. Yeah, something like that. And also center that. Now I can click and drag, hold Alt, click and drag, and there we go. All right. And so for this feature, let's just call this feature label. And we can change this to a different thing like that. And then the height would be 100%. And there we go. Okay. So last thing we need is that down arrow to open and close the accordion of the description of this feature, the detailed description. So first, let's bring in a link block on top of this same cell. Okay. And with that there, let's go ahead and move that to the right. Okay. And yeah. So what we can do now is drag in the yellow SVG. I want to put it inside the link block. Let's do it here. Okay, cool. Now you're not going to see it because of the SVG, but if I set the width on the SVG, let's say yellow arrow instead of width, there, I can see it now. All right. Now for both of these, let's go ahead and make sure, actually for this one, for the link block, so I'm on the link block for the yellow arrow, I'm going to vertically center it. Yeah, that looks good. All right, so that's going to do my interaction. Now, before we get into interaction, we got one more thing to put. It's the paragraph. So I'm going to drag a paragraph in here. Oh, okay, I see what I need to do. So drag a paragraph in here, and I'm going to edit this grid and add a second row. There we go. Actually, no, I'm not going to add a second row. I'm going to create a combo class first. Okay, so feature row. That way I can add a second row. Cool. And for this paragraph, I'm going to say row 2. Start at 2, end at 2. And that's it. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and name this feature detail. Okay, and there we go. Now that this is set up, we're already halfway done. We just need to do the interaction and then make it responsive. And then we can just copy and paste this feature row as many times as we want. Okay, so let's do that. For this link block, I'm going to give it an element trigger of mouse click. And on the first click, let's start animation. Let me delete these first so I can't cheat. There we go. Let's go here. And we're going to show details. Okay, so we're going to show details. Now, this is the plus sign. Now, if I add a transform or anything, if I add anything, it's being applied to that link block, okay, the thing that I'm selected on. So I don't want that to happen. What I want to happen is this feature detail, this paragraph. That's what I want an interaction to happen, okay? So I'm going to do plus and then size, and the size is going to be initial state and set to 0, okay? Then I'm going to affect anything with this same class. So right now, all elements with this class of feature detail will have this interaction applied to it. So what I want to do is only siblings of this class. Okay, now let me go back to Navigator. Now, see how the link block is on the same tab level as feature detail? That means that they are siblings. This yellow arrow, this is a child of link block. So for this feature detail, only siblings with this class. Okay, and now for the end, I'm going to set the size to auto. I'm going to set the easing to out, and we're done. Now, as you notice, these grow, but it doesn't really seem like an accordion. And here's the trick. Here's why. If I go back to my styles panel and click on overflow hidden, that way, when the height gets smaller, like let's start at 200, okay? And as it gets smaller, because the overflow is hidden, it gets hidden. And so when I go to 0, you don't see anything. But when you go to auto, you see it. So let's go ahead and play that interaction real quick. And there we go. And now all we got to do is the opposite. Okay, So let's go select action, start animation. And what I can do is duplicate this one. So rename this one to hide details. And I can delete this part right here because we want to go back to 0. And we're not going to set initial state. We're going to make it ease out. And now we have our interaction. That easy. Okay, so now that's done, let's go ahead and copy paste this row a couple times. So I'm going to copy it from here. Okay, and go to my outer grid. Oh, actually, so I've copied it, but first I need to put this inside of another div, so that way the second row of the parent div can grow. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to drag in a div block here. Okay, so we have the top one, and then we have a div block here, and I'm going to drag this one into here. And lastly, this div block, we want to make sure that it starts at 1, ends at 4 on the columns, and on the rows it starts at 2 and ends at 2. And now I can copy this and paste it as many times as I want. It looks like they're kind of squished together, so let's fix that real quick. Let's push it down on the margin. And there we go. Cool? Cool. And now if I look at this, there we go. Let's jazz it up a little bit. Let's spin this yellow arrow. Let's go back to our link block. Okay, and we have our link block, and I'm going to go back to the interactions, click on show details. Now let's jazz it up. Okay, so for this, let's go ahead and click on the yellow arrow, and we'll do a rotate, and again, affect the class. Okay, and I don't want to affect all the elements with this class. I want to affect the children. So like I said before, this is a child of the trigger, okay? So this is a sibling, and this is a child. Okay, so I'm going to go back here. I'm going to start the initial state at 0 on the Z. And right here, I'm going to set a rotate, set that easing to ease out, and set that to 180. And now when I press play, there we go. And if you want to make it turn the opposite direction, just do -180. And there we go. And lastly, when I hide the details, I'm just going to go back to here, click on, oops, I don't want the link block. I want the yellow arrow. There we go. I want the yellow arrow to ease out and affect only children up with this class, and set that back to 0. And there we go. Now we have our spinny. Yay. All right, hopefully that makes sense. All right, let's make it responsive now. So if I go here, everything looks good thanks to the grid. Let's go here. Everything still looks good thanks to the grid. You know what? It gets kind of squished here. So one thing we can do is let's make this go to here. I think that's fine. Yeah. Okay. And if you want, you can also just span it the whole way. Okay. But if you do that, make sure to do it for all of them. Okay. There we go. If I go here. Now, the reason why it looks cut off is because I'm not sure why why Webflow goes down to 320. I mean, who really uses a iPhone 5 Galaxy S2? 2? Yeah, we're at 10 now. So, I mean, this is Galaxy Note 3. We're at Galaxy Note 9. So, I think it's okay because right here is the iPhone 6. Okay, so 375. And if you look right here, it says affects 479 pixels and below. So if we go all the way to here, this is fine. This is fine. This is fine, okay? But okay, so what I see is, what I need to fix is right here, this yellow arrow bumps into these words. So what I can do is, let's add another row. Okay, after we add another row, let's go ahead and push all these checkboxes to the third row. So I'm going to push this to the third row, push this to the third row, push this to the third row. And just to make life easier for myself, I'm going to delete all of these. Okay, so I've deleted them all from every breakpoint. Okay, so I'm starting from this row again. Okay, and that way when I just copy and paste them, they all have this same structure. So anyways, I'm going to go to the link block. So I'm selected on the link block, and I'm going to drag it to here. And for this label, I'm going to drag that to here. And there we go. And now we have it responsive. And I'm going to paste, 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 and everything works. And if you hear my daughter, I'm sorry. She just got home. But that's the realness. I'm a dad. Okay, moving on. So that's about it. Yeah, don't cry. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. I'm confident you can do this. Okay, so if you have any questions about this tutorial video, let me know on the Slack channel. And again, if you want to just copy and paste this into a completely different project, an existing project, go ahead and do so. All you have to do is copy this wrapper and paste it over into your project, and that's about it. The interactions, styles, everything comes with it. Okay, so have fun, and yeah, and as always, make the web beautiful. See ya.